The sirens screamed across the Acrian fortress, on Cryoth's synthetic moon. Red alert strobes painted the obsidian corridors in crimson pulses as security forces scrambled to their positions. Something impossible had happened. Their impenetrable defense system had been breached. Captain Elena Reyes limped through the hallway, each step leaving a dark red smear on the polished black floor. Her diplomatic uniform, once pristine white with the Earth Alliance insignia, now bore a massive bloodstain spreading from her thigh. The wound throbbed with each heartbeat, reminding her of the sentry blast she'd taken while crossing the outer perimeter. But her eyes remained steady, focused forward as she clutched her diplomatic briefcase with white knuckles. An Acrian guard turned the corner and froze, his weapon half raised at the sight of her. His four eyes widened in their vertical arrangement, the characteristic sign of Acrian shock. "Excuse me," Elena said calmly, her voice perfectly measured despite the blood loss. "Could you direct me to the Strategic War Temple? I believe I have a meeting." The guard's mouth opened and closed, mandibles clicking nervously. You can't be here. This is a restricted—" "I understand." Elena nodded professionally. "However, I'm Earth's peace envoy, and I need to speak with your war council immediately." More guards appeared behind the first, weapons drawn, but hesitating. None fired. The sight of a blood-soaked human walking calmly through their most secure facility had short-circuited their training. This wasn't in any protocol. Lieutenant Herrick Solon, monitoring the security feeds, slammed his fist on the emergency alert button. His voice cracked as he announced over the internal comm system. "Security breach in Sector 7. Human intruder approaching the War Temple." In the grand chamber at the heart of the facility, General Arcus Vorn looked up from the holographic war table, his rigid posture betraying nothing of the disbelief coursing through him. The other 14 members of the Acrian War Council turned toward the massive doors as the alarms blared. "What incompetence is this?" General Vorn hissed. "How could a human possibly breach our defenses?" The doors slid open, and Elena Reyes stood in the entrance, one hand pressed against the wound on her thigh, the other still gripping her briefcase. Blood dripped steadily onto the sacred floor of their war chamber. The guards behind her seemed more afraid of her than she was of them. "General Vorn," Elena said, her voice echoing in the suddenly silent chamber. "I'm here to negotiate." Day 182 of the Liberation of Quandai campaign. That's what the Acrian called it. A liberation. To Earth and the other human colonies, it was an extermination. 6 months ago, the Acrian Empire had launched a coordinated assault on all 12 human outposts in the Ceres system. Their stated reason: humans were unworthy stewards of the resources they controlled. Their unstated reason: the Acrian war religion demanded regular conquests to appease their deities. The human settlements, with their limited military capabilities but valuable resource operations, made perfect sacrificial lambs. But humans had proven unexpectedly resilient. Despite inferior technology and being outgunned at every turn, Earth forces had managed to hold several strategic positions through guerrilla tactics and unpredictable maneuvers. The Acrian, with their rigid military doctrine, found themselves frustrated by human adaptability. Still, the end seemed inevitable. Acrian forces had superior numbers, weapons, and positioning. The Earth Central Command's latest transmission to Captain Reyes had been blunt. "Official diplomatic negotiations have failed. Acrian has rejected peace. We have one final chance. You must infiltrate immediately and force Acrian to the negotiating table at any cost." Elena had been selected for this mission, not just because she was an accomplished diplomat, but because she had studied Acrian psychology and culture more extensively than perhaps any other human. She understood their reverence for strength and their contempt for perceived weakness. Conventional diplomacy had failed because the Acrians saw it as humans begging from a position of inferiority. So, Elena had devised an audacious plan, one that required walking straight into the heart of enemy territory, alone and unarmed, except for her wits and understanding of Acrean psychology. The perimeter breach had gone according to plan, though the plasma wound on her thigh had not. She'd intentionally triggered certain alarms while disabling others, creating a confusion pattern in the Acrean security grid. What she hadn't counted on was the sentry drone's advanced targeting system, which had caught her with a glancing shot as she slipped through. Now, standing before the War Council, blood soaking her uniform, Elena let the pain fuel her resolve. The Acrean respected strength and boldness above all else, and nothing was bolder than walking into your enemy's command center, injured but unflinching, and demanding to be heard. "Captain Elena Reyes," General Vorn finally spoke, his deep voice carrying the distinctive metallic resonance of high-caste Acrean. "You've certainly made an entrance, though I believe our last communication made it clear that negotiations were concluded." Elena took a deliberate step forward, leaving another bloodstain on the sacred floor. Several council members flinched at the desecration. "Your communication stated that humans are unworthy of diplomatic relations," Elena replied, her voice steady. "Yet, here I stand, in the heart of your command, having bypassed your supposedly impenetrable defenses. Perhaps your assessment of human capabilities requires revision." She placed her briefcase on the large, circular table and opened it, removing a slim folder of documents. Her hands did not tremble, despite the blood loss making her lightheaded. "I've brought the Earth Peace Accord for your reconsideration. It was rejected on the 3rd of November. We still desire reconciliation." General Vorn's upper eyes narrowed while his lower pair fixed on the blood pooling at Elena's feet. "Foolish human. How did you—" He gestured at her wound, genuine confusion in his expression. "How are you still standing? How did you pass all our systems without being killed?" Elena maintained her composed diplomatic expression. "I came for one reason only, to bring Earth's peace directly to your negotiating table. This will help you avoid a global catastrophe." From the corner of the room, several council members hurriedly activated strategic analysis displays. "If we don't reconcile, Earth will activate Operation Red Vice," one of them muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. A tense silence fell over the chamber. Elena had thrown her first hook, and they'd bitten. 3 days earlier, Earth's Cyber Warfare Division had initiated a sophisticated campaign targeting Acreon military systems, unlike previous direct attacks, which the Acreon had easily repelled. This operation was subtle, inserting dormant code into various systems. The name Red Vice had been deliberately left as breadcrumbs for Acreon intelligence to find, a name without explanation, designed to create uncertainty and fear. Now Elena needed to capitalize on that uncertainty. "You seem well informed," she said, nodding toward the counselor who had mentioned Red Vice. "Then you're also aware that it's been active for the past 72 hours. General Vorn's posture stiffened further. "Show me the documents," he demanded, extending a hand. Elena passed the folder across the table. As Vorn flipped through the pages, she continued speaking, her voice taking on a lecturer's tone. "Are you familiar with the Australia Protocol, General?" Vorn looked up, confusion momentarily breaking through his disciplined expression. "It's a fascinating piece of Earth history," Elena continued. "Early in our military development, human forces engaged in combat against a species of flightless birds called emus. Despite superior firepower, the humans lost. They adapted, learned, and developed new strategies." "You're comparing your species to birds?" scoffed one of the council members. "I'm illustrating a principle," Elena replied calmly. "Humans excel at adapting when outmatched. Operation Red Vice is already demonstrating this." She gestured toward the strategic displays, where several council members were now frantically checking various system reports. 28% of your missile reserves have had their targeting codes altered. 12% of your battle robots are experiencing system errors, and 47% of your strategic defense analyses are now playing Earth pop music. The claim was exaggerated. Earth's cyber attacks had been far more limited, but the panic spreading across the room suggested the Acrian had indeed found some concerning vulnerabilities in their systems. And the uncertainty of not knowing the full extent of the infiltration was exactly what Elena needed. General Vorn slammed the folder onto the table. "This is absurd! Our systems are impenetrable!" "Yet here I stand," Elena replied simply, gesturing to herself. "In your most secure facility, bleeding on your sacred floor." From across the table, a female council member with elaborate military insignia rose to her feet. Strategic Commander Soria Nerix. Elena recognized her from intelligence briefings as the Acrian's foremost military analyst. "General," Nerix said, her voice tight, "I recommend we temporarily suspend Operation Crimson Star while we verify the integrity of our systems." Vorn shot her a look of pure rage, but Nerix held her ground. "If what she says about system infiltration is even partially true, we cannot risk launching our final assault when our missiles might target our own forces." Elena kept her expression neutral, but inwardly, she celebrated this first crack in the Acrian command unity. She had given them just enough truth, wrapped in strategic exaggeration, to plant seeds of doubt. "The peace accord offers a straightforward path forward," Elena said, drawing attention back to herself. "Earth requests official recognition as a protected civilization and immediate cessation of hostilities. In exchange, we will share our techniques for securing systems against the very vulnerabilities we've exploited." General Vorn's laugh was a harsh, grating sound. "You think we need protection from you? Your species is primitive. You've simply gotten lucky with a few clever tricks." Elena took another step forward, ignoring the dizzy spell that threatened to overtake her. The blood loss was becoming critical, but she couldn't show weakness now. "Is it luck that I'm standing here?" she asked softly. "That Earth forces have held out against your superior numbers for 6 months? That your most secure systems are now compromised?" She looked around the room, making eye contact with each council member. "The peace accord isn't charity, General. It's pragmatism. You've undoubtedly studied humanity's history of warfare. When faced with extinction, humans don't surrender. They become unpredictable, creative, and absolutely relentless." From the back of the room, a junior officer approached Commander Nerix, whispering urgently in her ear. Nerix's expression darkened as she listened. "General," she said, her voice carrying new urgency, "we've confirmed system breaches in 3 additional defense nodes. Our communications with the Cryoth fleet are compromised." Elena watched as General Vorn's composure finally began to crack. The uncertainty was working. The Acrian military doctrine relied on absolute control and perfect information, neither of which they now possessed. "How widespread is this infiltration?" Vorn asked, his voice lower. Elena seized the moment. "Widespread enough that I'm standing here, General. Widespread enough that I walked through your defenses with only a minor injury." She gestured toward her bleeding leg. "But containable enough that we're willing to help you restore your systems as part of the peace agreement." Lieutenant Herrick Solon, who had been monitoring the security systems, stepped forward nervously. "Sir, we're detecting anomalies in the perimeter defense grid. Several sectors are cycling between active and inactive states without authorization. Another piece of Earth's cyber warfare campaign revealing itself at the perfect moment." Elena silently thanked the Earth technicians for their precise timing. "This is outrageous," sputtered another council member. "We should simply execute this human and crush their remaining forces." "And risk 47% of your missiles targeting your own ships?" Elena asked calmly. "Bold strategy." General Vorn raised a hand for silence, his internal conflict evident in his rigid posture. The Acrian war religion demanded victory, but it also required wisdom in battle. fighting against an enemy who had already infiltrated your command center and compromised your weapon systems wasn't bravery. It was foolishness. We will review your peace terms, Vorn finally said, each word seeming to cause him physical pain. Elena nodded graciously, as though she'd expected nothing less. I recommend beginning with an immediate stand-down order for all Acrian forces. As a gesture of good faith, Earth will provide the decryption codes to restore control of your affected systems. Commander Narek stepped forward. And how do we know this isn't simply a delay tactic while you prepare a larger attack? Because I'm here, Elena replied simply. Would Earth send its lead diplomatic officer into enemy territory if we plan to destroy you? I've risked everything to stand before you today because we genuinely believe peace is possible. The blood loss was becoming critical now. Elena could feel her consciousness beginning to waver. She needed to secure at least a preliminary agreement before she collapsed. The terms, she said, tapping the folder on the table, include provisions for cultural exchange programs. We believe understanding between our species is the key to preventing future conflicts. She swayed slightly, catching herself on the edge of the table. The room had gone silent, all eyes fixed on her as she fought to remain standing. I propose we begin with a temporary ceasefire, effective immediately, Elena continued, her voice growing fainter. Followed by formal peace negotiations in neutral territory. General Vorn studied her for a long moment, then gave a sharp nod. Lieutenant Solon, prepare the communication channels. We will issue a temporary stand-down order to all Acrian forces, pending further negotiation. Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her, but kept her expression professional. She'd achieved the first step, breaking through the Acrians' absolute conviction in their military superiority. Now, she needed to secure safe passage back to Earth forces before she lost consciousness entirely. Thank you, General, she said formally. Earth looks forward to a productive dialogue. And now, if you'll excuse me, I believe I require medical attention. As if on cue, her legs finally gave out, and Elena collapsed onto the sacred floor of the war temple, her blood forming a stark red pool against the black surface. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was the circle of Acrian faces staring down at her with expressions ranging from contempt to newfound respect. And perhaps in some, the first glimmer of fear. Elena awoke in what appeared to be an Acrian medical facility. The lighting was dimmer than human standards, adjusted to accommodate Acrian's more sensitive eyes. Her leg had been treated, the wound sealed with some kind of crystalline substance that glowed faintly blue. Lieutenant Rokia Zent, the first officer she'd encountered in the hallway, stood stiffly by the door. When he saw that Elena was awake, he approached cautiously. Captain Reyes, he said formally, General Vorn has ordered me to inform you that your peace proposal is being considered by the High Command. Elena struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain in her leg. That's not what we agreed to. We agreed to an immediate ceasefire. A temporary stand-down has been issued, Zent clarified. No offensive operations are currently underway, but the general must consult with the Central Acrian Sun before any formal agreements can be ratified. Elena nodded, understanding the political reality. General Vorn couldn't unilaterally commit to peace without approval from higher authorities, but the stand-down order was already a significant victory. How long have I been unconscious? She asked. Approximately 7 Earth hours, Zent replied. Your physiology responded unexpectedly to our medical procedures. You should have died from such blood loss. There was something like reluctant admiration in his voice. Elena filed that away as useful information. The Acrian were beginning to reassess human resilience. Lieutenant, she said, keeping her tone conversational. Have you ever interacted with humans before this conflict? Zent shifted uncomfortably. Only through military briefings. Humans are categorized as a Class 3 civilization, technologically advanced enough for interstellar travel, but lacking the sophisticated defensive systems of higher classes. And yet, here we are, Elena said with a small smile. Perhaps those classifications need updating. Before Zent could respond, the door slid open and Commander Nerix entered. Her formal military attire had been replaced by what appeared to be a ceremonial robe, an indication that some kind of official proceeding was underway. "Captain Reyes," Nerix said briskly, "you will accompany me to the Central Communication Chamber. The Acrian High Command wishes to address you directly." Elena carefully swung her legs off the medical platform, testing her weight on the injured leg. It held, though the pain was considerable. "I would be honored," she replied formally. As they walked through the corridors, Elena limping, but refusing any assistance, she noted that the Acrian personnel they passed now regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and wariness, rather than the dismissive contempt she'd observed in previous encounters. Her bloody entrance had clearly made an impression. The Central Communication Chamber was a vast, domed space dominated by a massive holographic projection system. General Vorn and the entire War Council were already assembled, arranged in a semicircle before the central platform. Vorn acknowledged Elena with a stiff nod. "Captain Reyes, the Central Acrian Sun has agreed to hear your proposal directly. I advise you to be brief and respectful." Elena took her position on the platform, standing as straight as her injury allowed. The holographic system hummed to life, and suddenly the air before her filled with the imposing image of an elderly Acrian draped in elaborate ceremonial armor. The insignia identified him as Supreme Commander of the Acrian Forces, a position that combined military leadership with religious authority. "I am Hierarch Dravex," the figure announced, his voice resonating through the chamber. "You are the human who breached our most secure facility to demand peace." It wasn't a question, but Elena answered anyway. "I am Captain Elena Reyes, Peace Envoy of Earth. I came to prevent further bloodshed between our peoples. By spilling your own blood on our sacred ground," Dravex observed. "An unusual diplomatic tactic. Desperate circumstances require unconventional approaches," Elena replied. "The continued conflict serves neither of our civilizations. Earth seeks recognition and protection, not dominance." Dravex's upper eyes narrowed. "General Vorn informs me that Earth forces have compromised Acrian military systems. This is an act of war, not peace." "It was a demonstration," Elena countered calmly. "Had we wished to use those vulnerabilities for destruction, we would have done so without warning. Instead, we offer to help secure those same systems as a part of our peace agreement." She could see the calculation in Dravex's expression. The Acrian prided themselves on technological superiority. The revelation that humans had found exploitable weaknesses in their systems was perhaps more disturbing to them than any military defeat. "Your species is young," Dravex said after a long pause. "Impulsive, unpredictable. These are not qualities the Acrian respect. They are qualities that have allowed us to survive against overwhelming odds," Elena replied. "They are also qualities that make us valuable allies. Our different perspectives can strengthen both our civilizations." She gestured toward the peace accord, which now rested on a small pedestal near General Vorn. "The cultural exchange program outlined in our proposal would allow Acrian to better understand human innovation, while humans would benefit from Acrian discipline and technological expertise." Dravex was silent for several moments, his gaze shifting between Elena and the assembled War Council. Finally, he spoke. "General Vorn, your assessment?" Vorn stepped forward, his posture rigid. "The human proposal has merit from a strategic perspective. Earth forces have demonstrated unexpected resilience and resourcefulness. Continuing the conflict would require significant resource allocation with uncertain results." From Vorn, this tepid endorsement was equivalent to enthusiastic support. Elena carefully kept her expression neutral, but inwardly, she knew she was witnessing a historic shift in Acrian military doctrine. "Commander Nerix?" Dravex prompted. Nerix's response was more direct. "Our system vulnerabilities must be addressed immediately. The human offer of assistance could expedite this process. Additionally, I believe further study of human adaptive strategies would benefit Acrian military development." Dravex considered this, then turned his attention back to Elena. "Captain Reyes, the Acrian do not retreat from battle without cause. What assurances can Earth provide that this peace will be honored?" "The same assurances you provide us," Elena replied. "Mutual respect and mutual benefit. The peace accord includes provisions for regular diplomatic exchanges and joint oversight committees. But perhaps more importantly, it recognizes that neither of our civilizations can afford the continued drain on resources this conflict demands." She took a careful step forward, ignoring the pain shooting through her leg. "Hierarch Dravex, Acrian military doctrine emphasizes efficiency and strategic advantage. There is no efficiency in prolonging a conflict where victory becomes increasingly costly. There is no strategic advantage in fighting an enemy who grows more adaptive with each engagement." A murmur ran through the assembled council members. Elena had deliberately echoed core principles from Acrian military texts, principles that even their religious fervor couldn't entirely override. Dravex's holographic form seemed to expand slightly as he drew himself up. "The Acrian High Command will consider Earth's proposal. In the meantime, the stand-down order will remain in effect. You will be permitted to return to Earth forces to communicate our willingness to explore diplomatic solutions." It wasn't a full acceptance, but it was far more than any previous human diplomat had achieved. Elena bowed her head in formal acknowledgement. "Earth thanks you for your wisdom. Hierarch Dravex, we look forward to building a peaceful relationship between our civilizations." As the holographic projection faded, Elena allowed herself a small smile. The first and most dangerous phase of her mission was complete. She had forced the Acrian to see humans not as weak inferiors to be conquered, but as unpredictable equals worthy of diplomatic engagement. General Vorn approached her, his expression unreadable. "You will be escorted back to the boundary zone. Captain Reyes, a medical transport has been arranged, considering your condition." "Thank you, General," Elena replied. "I look forward to our next meeting under more conventional diplomatic circumstances." As she turned to follow Lieutenant Zent toward the exit, Commander Nerix fell into step beside her. "Your strategy was effective, Captain," Nerix said quietly. "Bleeding on our sacred ground while offering peace terms. It created a cognitive dissonance our military doctrine wasn't prepared for." Elena glanced at the commander, surprised by her frankness. "Sometimes the strongest position is one your opponent doesn't expect you to take." Nerix nodded thoughtfully. "The cultural exchange program you proposed, what exactly did you envision?" "Understanding begins with exposure," Elena replied. "Art, music, literature, philosophy. These reveal more about a civilization than any military briefing. I believe Acrian and humans have much to learn from each other." They had reached the transport bay. A small Acrian shuttle waited, its engines humming softly. "Perhaps," Nerix said, with what might have been the Acrian equivalent of a smile. "In time, we will discover that our differences are less important than our similarities." Lieutenant Zent helped Elena board the shuttle, then paused before sealing the door. "Captain Reyes," he said hesitantly, "your actions today will be remembered in Acrian military records." Elena nodded acknowledgement. "As will your response, Lieutenant. Peace requires courage from both sides." As the shuttle departed the Acrian facility, Elena finally allowed herself to relax. The pain in her leg was excruciating, and she was still dangerously weak from blood loss. But she had accomplished what no conventional diplomat could have. She had shocked the Acrian out of their rigid military thinking and forced them to consider humans as equals. The shuttle's view screen showed the vast expanse of Cryoth's synthetic moon falling away beneath them. Somewhere down there, in the heart of the Acrian War Temple, her blood still stained the sacred floor, a visceral reminder that humans were willing to bleed for peace, but unwilling to be exterminated without consequence. 3 weeks later, Elena stood before the Earth Security Council, her leg mostly healed, but still bearing the crystalline scar of Acrian medical technology. The council chamber was packed with representatives from all 12 human colonies, eager to hear the details of the unprecedented diplomatic breakthrough. The Acrian High Command has formally accepted the main provisions of our peace accord, Elena announced, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Earth and all human settlements are now officially recognized as a protected civilization under Acrian interstellar law. A murmur of relief and disbelief swept through the assembly. After 6 months of devastating conflict, few had believed peace was possible. Additionally, Elena continued, the cultural exchange program will begin next month. Acrian scholars and artists will visit Earth, while human representatives will be welcomed on Cryoth and other Acrian worlds. Council Chairwoman Josephine Martinez leaned forward. And what of Operation Red Vice? Have we secured all Acrian military systems? Elena nodded. Our technical teams have been working directly with Acrian security specialists. All identified vulnerabilities have been addressed, and a joint cybersecurity task force has been established to prevent future exploitations from either side. This last point had been a delicate negotiation. The Acrian had initially demanded that Earth surrender all information about their cyber warfare capabilities. Elena had countered with a proposal for mutual security development, transforming what could have been punitive terms into a collaborative partnership. And what of the Acrian war religion? Asked another counselor. Can we truly expect lasting peace from a civilization that worships conflict? Religious transformation happens gradually, Elena replied carefully. But cultural exchange opens new perspectives. Already, there are reports of Acrian religious scholars reinterpreting their texts to emphasize strategic wisdom over conquest. She didn't mention her private conversations with Commander Nerix, who had confided that Elena's bloody diplomatic mission had sparked intense theological debates among Acrian religious leaders. Some were beginning to suggest that true strength might lie in selective peace rather than constant warfare. Captain Reyes, Martinez said, her tone formal but warm. Your unconventional approach has achieved what conventional diplomacy could not. The Security Council extends its highest commendation for your service. Elena inclined her head in acknowledgement. The credit belongs to everyone who contributed to Operation Red Vice, and to the resilience of all human settlements that held out long enough for diplomacy to succeed. As the council meeting concluded, Elena made her way slowly through the crowded chamber, accepting congratulations from various officials. Near the exit, she found Ambassador Giagine Peña Reyes, her mother, waiting with a proud smile. Your father would have been amazed, Giagine said, embracing her daughter. Walking into an enemy command post covered in blood to demand peace? That's even more dramatic than his approach to the European trade dispute. Elena laughed. I remembered his stories about facing down the European delegation. Sometimes you have to shock them into seeing you differently, he always said. And the Australia Protocol? Giagine asked, with a knowing smile. That was a creative touch. It worked, Elena shrugged. The Acrian couldn't reconcile their image of humans as weak inferiors with the idea that we'd continue fighting even when victory was impossible. The Emu War anecdote just gave that concept a tangible history. They walked together toward the diplomatic quarter, where celebrations were already underway. The streets were filled with people enjoying the first real sense of security they'd felt in months. What happens now? Giagine asked. Will you continue as the primary liaison with the Acrian? Elena nodded. The cultural exchange program needs someone who understands both sides. And honestly, I've developed a certain rapport with Commander Nerix and Lieutenant Zent. Rapport? Jiajin raised an eyebrow. With the same Acreon who were trying to exterminate us a month ago? Peace requires seeing the individual behind the enemy label. Elena replied. Nerix and Zent were the first to recognize the value in cooperation rather than conflict. They'll be crucial allies in ensuring the peace endures. As they reached the central plaza, they found it transformed into an impromptu festival. Musicians played while people danced, the relief of survival mingling with hope for the future. Above the crowd, a large screen displayed images from the first Acreon cultural delegation's arrival on Earth. Tall, formal figures examining human art with expressions of cautious curiosity. Look, Jiajin pointed to another screen, showing a very different scene. On what appeared to be a Cryoth public square, a group of young Acreon were playing earth jazz instruments, their traditional ceremonial attire contrasting strangely with the saxophones and trumpets. Phase 2. Cultural convergence is already underway. Elena observed with satisfaction. Music transcends species barriers more effectively than any diplomatic protocol. And what about Phase 3? Jiajin asked. Elena watched the young Acreon musicians, their awkward but enthusiastic attempts at jazz, drawing an increasingly large crowd of curious onlookers. Economic integration, scientific collaboration, perhaps eventually a formal alliance, she said. But the foundation had to be cultural understanding. You can't build lasting peace on fear alone. Later that evening, as the celebrations continued around them, Elena received a secure communication from Lieutenant Zent. The message was brief, but significant. Acreon religious authorities had formally redesignated humans from conquest-worthy adversaries to respected allied civilization in their ceremonial texts. Attached to the message was an image that made Elena laugh out loud. It showed the sacred floor of the War Temple, where a section of the polished black stone had been deliberately left unstained. Her bloodstain had been preserved and encased in a clear protective covering, with an inscription in both Acreon and English. Where one human walked bleeding for peace, two civilizations found a new path forward. Ambassador Jiajin read the message over her daughter's shoulder and shook her head in amazement. Only you could turn bleeding all over their sacred floor into a revered historical monument. Elena smiled. Sometimes the most powerful diplomatic statement is simply showing up where no one expects you, in a condition no one anticipates, to say things no one is prepared to hear. She looked up at the night sky, where Cryoth's synthetic moon was just visible as a faint gleam among the stars. Somewhere up there, Acreon children were learning to play jazz, while their elders debated the theological implications of peace with humans. And on Earth, the first Acreon art exhibition was drawing curious crowds, opening minds to new perspectives. It wasn't perfect, and the peace would require constant nurturing. But Captain Elena Reyes had proven that, with enough courage, creativity, and well-timed audacity, even the most entrenched conflict could give way to understanding. All it had taken was one human, walking into an enemy command post covered in blood, saying those improbable words, "I'm here to negotiate." A month later, the first joint human Acreon scientific expedition set out to explore a previously contested star system. The mission patch displayed a simple but powerful image. A human handprint in red, overlapping with an Acreon handprint in blue, forming a purple intersection where they met. Beneath it, in both languages, was written, "Progress leaves marks. Let them be shared."